Good day, friend. Welcome to our study number 22 in this series, The Revelation of Hope. The topic for this broadcast is Revelation's Movement of Destiny. Now, with the previous broadcast, you and I looked at Revelation's last appeal, and basically we learned that the book of Revelation describes two systems of religion. Revelation presents a strong appeal to you and I that we commit ourselves to Jesus. Firstly, this appeal can be summarized in the symbolism of the two women in Revelation. The woman in white is described in Revelation 12, and in Revelation 17 another woman rides upon a scarlet-colored beast. Revelation calls her a harlot woman who has left her true lover Jesus Christ. This is the apostate system of religion. Secondly, the true church is described in Revelation 12. Christ is predominant in the true church and is pictured as the faithful bride of Christ. Thirdly, in contrast, the woman of Revelation 17 is one who has left her true lover. This is the fallen church who dominates many peoples. There is an illicit union where the church is united with the state. The fallen church looks to the kings and the political leaders of the earth for power. She passes around her wine cup of false doctrine. The world becomes intoxicated with error, and millions drink of the wine of Babylon and are deceived. Fourthly, the harlot woman of Revelation 17 represents a false system of religion that is in opposition to the true system. In the hand of this fallen system of religion, whose colors are purple and scarlet, there is a wine cup, and all the world drinks and becomes confused by these false doctrines. And the golden wine cup in her hand represents intoxication of false doctrines. Fifthly, she's the mother of churches. Protestant churches have come out of her, but have retained some of her false doctrines. And Revelation 17 is about spiritual Babylon, a religious system that would depart from the pure teaching of God's word. False doctrines would come into the church through this false religious system called Babylon. Sixthly, in the Old Testament, not long after the worldwide flood, there were a group of men and women who rebelled against God. They built the Tower of Babel, which they erected in defiance to God because they did not accept God's word that the world would never again be destroyed by a flood. This was rebellion against God. Seventhly, later the city of Babylon was built on the site of the Tower of Babel. So Babylon means confusion. And likewise, when religion accepts man's ideas rather than God's ideas, it becomes confused. So spiritual Babylon represents a man-made religion established by man, based on man's teachings, and established on man's ideas. Eighthly, there are two systems of religion, one man-made and one God-made. The true church has a solid foundation, being Jesus Christ, which is built on true doctrine. Babylon is a man-made system of religion. The Church of Jesus Christ is not a man-made institution. It was built by Jesus himself. In fact, in Colossians 1 verse 18 it says, "And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have preeminence." So Jesus Christ is number one in the true church. Jesus Christ has preeminence. Jesus Christ is the only head of the church. Ninthly, earthly Babylon in the Old Testament had an earthly head that was preeminent. And once again in the last days, a church-state system would arise called spiritual Babylon, who would have a spiritual leader claiming to speak as God. So spiritual Babylon would have a leader who claimed that his word had the authority and the power of the very God of heaven. The first identifying feature of spiritual Babylon is thus that it has an earthly head who speaks for God and in place of God. Number 10. We read very clearly in Exodus chapter 20 verses 4 and 5. It clearly says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image." Now Babylon was a center of image worship through all of the Old Testament. Babylon used images prolifically in its worship services, and many of those images found their way from paganism to Rome and into the Christian church. Now, Christ invites us to come directly to him, not to go through images. We do not need to come through him through priests or saints or some other intercessor. He is our intercessor. He is our priest. Number 11. Babylon in the Old Testament was the center of false teachings about death. It was the center of the doctrine of the immortality of the soul. Now, Ezekiel 8 verses 13 and 14 records how the women were sitting there weeping for Tammuz. Now, Tammuz is the god of vegetation. And the Babylonians believed that Tammuz died in winter and would be resurrected in the spring. Now, some Jews accepted this false idea from Babylon straight out of paganism. And that's why Ezekiel describes them as worshipping Tammuz. They are worshipping the dead. Number 12. This false idea that the dead live on and the soul is immortal slipped into the Old Testament church directly from paganism. And here's what the Bible has to say about death. Ecclesiastes 9 verse 5, For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Now Satan said to Eve, You shall not surely die. You are immortal. Now that idea of the immortality of the soul, worshipping the dead, bowing before images representing the dead, all gave way to the pagan doctrine of bringing offerings for the dead. Now, number 13. The immortality of the soul belief negates the necessity of the second coming of Christ completely.